I'm chatting to Wendy Appelbaum. This is Captains of Industry here on CNBC Africa, DSTV 410. How would you describe yourself?
Well, I think I've been described as all sorts of things. Feisty, cheeky, I can't say it on television, full of other stuff.
Is it all true?
Spunky. Yeah, I think it is. I think, when enough people tell you you're drunk, you have to go to bed. So it must be true.
How many people know that you wanted to be a doctor?
I think I really actually used to say that quite often, but recently I've just been involved in an amazing court case, second one in the last couple of years. And actually, when I think about it in hindsight, I probably would have been a better lawyer.
Well, there's still time. Let's talk about the court case, because you bring it up, and obviously you're referring to the garnishing order.
Absolutely. This was a wonderful, wonderful court case. I think I better give you a little bit of background.
Give me a little bit of background, context for our viewers out there who haven't necessarily been following the case that closely.
So I have a wine estate where I produce wine, and my workers were really being disadvantaged hugely by garnishing orders, which are orders of court, and the employer is obliged by law to take whatever they owe of their salaries. And I looked at some of these, and eventually one of my workers had 80% of his salary garnished, and I thought, this is not possible. So I went off to the bookstore. I live in a university town, and I bought the National Credit Act. And
you read it from start to finish?
I absolutely did, and I bought the Magistrates Court Act. And I realized this was not right. So I decided to take on a case on behalf of the poor, because what really, really bothered me about this was that the poor had absolutely no access to the law, which I gave them their human dignity and their rights to actually fight for what was right. And so I took on the garnishing orders and the micro-lenders and the debt collectors, who are probably even worse.
Now, you must have had to have nerves of steel while taking on the debt collectors. Are these the kind of break your kneecap type debt collectors?
Yeah, there's a wonderful saying about it's easy to do something that is right, to fight for something that is right. It's very difficult to fight for something that is wrong, because you tend to be the first person out there fighting it. People did say I was mad. But you cannot live in a country and watch such gross unfairness and let it go. If you're aware of it, I honestly believe that anybody who doesn't act on it, heart is not in the right place.
I want to go back to the debt collectors, the micro-lenders, and that analogy. Are these, or were these, the kneecap breaking type debt collectors? Did you ever feel as though your life was in danger while you took on this huge case?
It was quite interesting, because the Hawks are still investigating it. And originally I was very much in the shadows, and they actually spoke to me and they said, we cannot protect you if you're in the shadows. You must actually come out and take your responsible place in this case. You know what? I think if you spend your life in fear, you'll never get anything done.
Where are you in the process now?
Well, the process is that we got a marvelous judgment, which was an absolute victory for the poor. It was really incredible. And it was basically thrown out by the judge. And what we did, in fact, the case was really a small sample of these victims. So it was, in a way, it was a small class action, which we fought on behalf, and then we took on government. So we took on the Department of Justice, we took on the Department of Trade and Industry, where microfinance lies for some inexplicable reason, but it does. And we took on the National Credit Regulator for a number of things. Basically, that the legislation was very poor, and that was a major issue that we had really with the Department of Justice. And then the fact that the National Credit Regulator, who really has the power to enforce the law, did absolutely nothing. So it was a case of absolutely no care for the poor. And I think that's what made me so wild.
Does it end here?
No, we are waiting for, it's got to go to the Constitutional Court, because it was a constitutional challenge, for ratification. And then, because the Department of Trade and Industry abided, as did the National Credit Regulator, they will be obliged to make every single change that was changed in this groundbreaking judgment by Judge Desai. So they have no option.
And you're going to see this through.
And we're going to see it through. We're going to see legislation change. We're going to see the consequences. Unfortunately, there were no consequences. But it's been fantastic because everybody's actually starting to work towards it. And we reckon that there, probably somewhere in the region of 5 billion rand a year was stolen from the poor in excess interest rates, legal fees and tracing fees. So it was just insane.
It's not your first high-profile public spat, and I take you back to December 2010, Coin Rock, Rail Levitt.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, I love a fight, but I love a fight for good even more. But, that was just a question of gross unfairness. And at that point, when I started to investigate this, I realized...
Again, just for context for the viewers, effectively you were bidding for CoinRock in an auction process, and you were bidding against a ghost auction, a ghost bidder.
I didn't know at the time, but there were just a couple of things. And I honestly think that female intuition came to play in this one. So there was a ghost bidder in the room who was pushing me up artificially. And when I wouldn't go up anymore, he reversed the bid and said, "Oh, sorry, sir, was that not a bid?" And then actually I've done a lot of investigation into personality and how people react. And the fact that he was on a podium and we were on sitting way below him. And when he said, "Sorry, sir, is that not a bid?" It was humanly impossible for a human would have had to be about 20 foot or more. And then I realized actually something was up. So I investigated. I refused to sign the conditions of sale until they brought me the genuine bidder. But yeah, once again,
you won.
Once again, it was nerves of steel. He tried to bully me. He tried to sue me for defamation and all sorts of things. And I just stuck to the knitting because I knew I was right. And it's, that's the easy one.
CoinRock didn't become a reality for you from a wine farm perspective?
No, I mean, I think that there were two choices in that movie, really. You can't have a moral high ground and have the farm. Because in fact, the price that I got it for was a fair price. I wasn't unhappy with the price. What I was unhappy with was the process. And I wondered how many people had previously been grossly disadvantaged by the process. And in fact, that it was plain fraud. There was no other word to describe it. So I rather chose to have the moral high ground on the fight than the farm. So I didn't get it. No.
But you've got De Morgenson.
I have
the Morning Sun.
I have De Morgenson, which is an absolute delight in my life. In fact, it is crazy to be in Johannesburg talking to you at the moment, because 9.5 years ago, I never believed that I would manage to fall out of mainstream society the way that I did, and the peace and tranquility that I find on the farm, and the amount of work that I'm able to do as opposed to what I did here. Johannesburg is vibrant and it's busy and you can't resist. You're always being invited.
Well, I'm glad you complimentary to my hometown.
Kind of things.
Thank you very much.
I was born here, kid. I spent nearly 45 years here. So at the end of the day, you take a lot of clutter out of your life living in the countryside because there's distractions. You can't resist going, you can't resist accepting invitations or whatever. And actually it eats your life. So I'm delighted to live on the farm. It's a fabulous environment to think and work. And
it sounds as though you're telling me that you've actually managed to claw back some time.
Absolutely. I am
Isn't time
a
the best
million
currency
times more productive than I ever was.
Time's the best currency. It's all about time. It's an organic wine farm.
Well, let me take you through the concept of organic. We basically use organic practices on our farm. But the love and the care that goes into starting a wine farm, I have to ask myself one question when looking at organic certification. Would I save my vineyards if something happened? And once you answer that, then to go for organic certification means you are prepared to break the rules if something serious happened to my vines in terms of virus or something. So, we practice organic practices, and so we put almost no poisons and things that aren't organic into the vineyards. And I think that actually wine is made in the vineyards. It is a very gentle, clever winemaker who nurtures it through the process.
And playing music to the vines?
But the grapes are grown. And you can make bad wine with good grapes, but you can never make good wine with bad grapes. So your grapes, which are your most important ingredient. So we treat them with great love and care, and we even go to the extent of playing their music. So we play music to the vines, which is Baroque music, which is supposedly mathematically correct. So there's nothing jarring, no voice, and it's had the most extraordinary effect. I mean, you read about these. This was an experiment. It was something fun, different. The wine industry is full of stories or whatever. And we thought we'd try it, because there have been experiments done with tomatoes, and they've been played heavy metal and dyed, and they've been played pretty music, and they've blossomed.
How did you settle on the music choice?
We decided, because it was the most mathematically correct music, that we would try that as an experiment. But not only has it had the most amazing effect on the evenness of the bunches as they ripen, the length of time. Now, the longer a grape hangs on the vine, the more flavors and all sorts of things that it develops without getting sweet too early and the sugar's going too high. So it's a very scientific thing. But they do hang 3 weeks longer than the control block, which is the identical, planted at the identical time, the identical cultivar, the identical aspect to the sun, etc., etc. So it's a proper control block. But also the alcohols are lower, which we cannot get our mind around. But it is fabulous. And we then play it to inside the winery, both to the fermenting wines and then those that are lying in barrel. You played this very beautiful music. And they are very beautiful wines.
It sounds like a little piece of heaven.
I tell you, it is a little piece of heaven. And my workers are much happier. It's got a very peaceful and beautiful environment in which to work.
You also are creating award-winning wines, so you must have the formula down pat. And I refer now to the 2005 Chenin Blanc, that was the first South African wine to be awarded 5 stars in the Platter Guide.
Well, it was a maiden vintage. It was the first maiden vintage ever too. But you know, I think it's with any business, Bronwyn. If you're going to go to the effort of running a business, do it properly. So what I always say to my staff, do your best. I think, and most entrepreneurs will tell you that there's luck involved. And I will tell you that when we bought De Morganson, we knew the terroir was good because the neighbors were making nice wine. But we did not realize that we were sitting on a golden piece of ground that needed to be loved and treated in the right way, which we did. So we replanted most of the vineyards, except for the Chenin Blanc. So we decided that we would use that as an experiment to see what old Chenin Blanc grapes are very hard to come by today, but they make the most incredible wines. And honestly, I think that they are South Africa's real secret to our white wines. I think the way they were treated in the past and made into sweet wines or whatever the case may be didn't give the cultivar the respect that it needs. It is really a wonderful cultivar. So we did that, and so the message on the farm is always to maximize and do your best.
You're a perfectionist. You've stated that. You've just said now that if you're going to run a business, do it well. You were a provincial tennis player at school. You started golf at the age of 30 and then became a provincial golf player. Has there been any failure in your life, Wendy?
You know, that's an interesting thing. I mean, what is failure?
How do you define failure?
Failure is not reaching your own personal best goal. So, but I'm competitive. And I think that's one of my real motivating things. So I am competitive, and even in the wine industry, to make the most delicious, wonderful wine. I have to say that Chenin Blanc has gone on to be win the International Wine and Spirits competition for the best Chenin Blanc in the world. So it is the world trophy winner. So
see, now your competitiveness is really coming out.
I am driven by competitiveness. I really do, and I think so. That I think is really is how do you assess whether or not you've been successful. But I am driven. I'm one of those people who's up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have this enormous energy and the pleasure of being able to channel it and to get people to come along with your journey and buy into your vision and your thing has been fantastic. So you don't do this alone, Bronwyn. It is a team effort. I am not the winemaker.
Let's talk a bit about your father, Donald Gordon. You've been described as a chip off the old block, and you've taken that as flattery, saying that actually it's not a bad block to be a chip of. You've also said that your father sexist and that he needed affirmation.
I think you're talking about probably stereotypes. And I think he's no different from anybody else. He just came from a generation where it was okay not to pretend that you weren't sexist. I think people brush over it a lot, and they are just, I think it's just become so much more spoken about today. But I think most men are sexist, actually. They really are. Why they feel superior, I still don't know, never will. But they do, and most men think about themselves.
Now, your first position, board position, was in the Liberty boardroom. Your father was chairing the meeting, and you challenged him.
I absolutely
Take me
did.
back to that moment.
It was absolutely fantastic. In fact, the story went along these lines. Right. Any questions? Let's continue. I said, excuse me, was that one sentence or two? He says it was two. I said, well, if I'm not mistaken, the first was a question. And actually, I do have a question, which he politely answered as minimalistically as he could. And I continued to ask a few questions. And afterwards, he put his arm around me and he said, darling, nobody challenges me in my boardroom.
But it didn't stop there.
And I said, really? I said, darling, I have got better things to do with my time. And if you want a rubber stamp, why don't you go to the post office? Because at the end of the day, if you can't give feedback in a boardroom, what are you doing now?
Your brothers, two brothers and yourself growing up in the Gordon household. Many say that if Liberty hadn't been sold to Standard Bank by your father, you would have taken over the reins. Is that true?
Oh, he would have been very lucky if I'd wanted to work for him. No, I'm kidding.
Were you in line?
Would I have done a good job? I think I would have done a good job. Did my father think I was too aggressive? He probably did. But I think afterwards he was a little bit sorry. And I guess it was no longer a family business. It was a huge business, and there were shareholders and there were all sorts of things. And I don't think my father would have put himself in a position of putting me into a family succession plan. I think it was very corporately sound in terms of that kind of thing. So, would I have even wanted to?
Perhaps that's the question. Would you have wanted to run the Liberty Group?
I think it would have been a great challenge. Would I have stayed there for the rest of my life? Probably not.
May I ask who our visitor
Freya,
is?
you are not invited to this. Just because it looks like a girls' tea party does not mean that you shouldn't leave the table, sweet one.
You have started a number of successful ventures. Wippold, you are a co-founder of, and we have recently celebrated the All Africa Business Leader Awards for Southern Africa. Louisa Magella and Gloria Sorobi were there winning Businesswoman of the Year. You, of course, won Forbes Woman of the Year.
Well, those were fabulous days. I have to say that we started Whiphold in 1994, just after the changeover. And it was a wonderful learning curve from many perspectives, having grown up in apartheid South Africa, although I went to Wits University and I had met women other than domestic women, because really most people those were the only women that white kids in this country were really exposed to. Wits, I had a bit of an exposure, but this was now really the first time that, you know, we were colleagues and we shared cultural differences and we laughed. We had such fun, you have no idea. I have to say that was one of the best boards that I ever sat on. It was absolutely fascinating. It was sharp. Women were so much more honest. We are so much more honest. Things are brought out. Very rarely are there elephants in the room when there are a bunch of women in the room.
You believe women can run a business better than men?
There's no doubt in my mind. Women can do anything they want to do. They can do anything they want to do. It's just a question of really regaining their confidence in themselves. Because I think after so many years of having this constant negative acid that gets poured onto women by society, I cannot think of a man who is better at any job other than something that requires great physical strength than a woman. I believe we can do anything. But Whiphold was incredible, and I was so chuffed to see them up there last night.
What does it mean to you winning Forbes Africa Woman of the Year?
You know, I think it is, as I said last night, I think it is the most wonderful. I was absolutely flattered and astonished, because I think that we get on with our lives. I don't do anything what I would call the return on ego, but those are so affirming awards, and they actually kind of make it all worthwhile, although you don't start out with the intention of doing that. And I was absolutely chuffed. Everybody's got an ego, even if women's egos are much lower and smaller than men. It is fantastic to be recognized for what one does.
You do a lot of giving back, and you are renowned as a philanthropist. Where are the special touch points for you when it comes to giving back?
You know, I think that there are all sorts of touch points. I mean, I do have an enormous sympathy with women, and education and healthcare. Those are the three areas in which I'm utterly fascinated. Probably from having wanted to be a doctor, I do have an affiliation with those things, but I also believe that education is how people, you know, it's the fishing rod and the fish story. Somebody who's educated can go out and make their own lives. And so it's changed. I think I call myself an impact philanthropist, so I like to spend the minimum amount of money to have the maximum benefit. We have major problems in this country, and there is certainly an incredible need for civil society and private individuals to actually, over and above pay our taxes, which we do, to have the privilege and the pleasure of being able to make a difference in people's lives.
Is it a burden that on different metrics you are described as Africa's richest woman?
You know, I think it is a burden in a way, but it's also a blessing that you have got the ability to make that difference. I mean, you know, I think talking about philanthropy, I don't think you have to be rich to be a philanthropist. And in terms of the case that I just did on the garnishing orders, I mean, I worked on that case for 2.5 years. So it wasn't just the money, it was the time and the effort. Now everybody's got time and effort and passion. So being a philanthropist is about change, being a change agent. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not just about giving money away. I really believe that you need to impact and be connected and bring people together in order to make those kind of changes. So it's a very social thing, and it's that privilege of connectivity. Whether does money make you happy, the old story is absolutely not.
Is it a burden being seen and regarded as Africa's richest woman?
You know, honestly, I'm sure it's not true. I really don't know where people pick up the statistics, because I'm very, very shy about my wealth and whatever, and I see it more as an asset and as a change agent than anything else. Is it a burden? I wouldn't call it a burden. I think it's a responsibility, and you either rise to the occasion or you don't.
South Africa today, we have a particular environment that the economy is facing. It's not a buoyant economy by any means. Many are saying that there's a crisis in leadership. What are your thoughts on South Africa?
There's no doubt that there's a crisis in leadership. No doubt in my mind at all. I think that corruption is really rife, and I think it's become the order of the day, which is really, really bad. And this country needs a change in direction. I would really like to see a woman as our next president.
I think that's a very good place to leave this interview. Wendy, thanks so much for your time. I've been chatting to Wendy Appelbaum, the extraordinary Wendy Appelbaum. You're watching Captains of Industry here on CNBC Africa, DSTV 410.